Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K, 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 S-I-C-K,
All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K, 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 S-I-C-K.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. With Tony Marinaro.
55 seconds left in the penalty, a minute and 27 seconds left in regulation time. Boston 4, Montreal 3. Lafleur coming out rather gingerly on the right side. He gives it into Lemaire, back to Lafleur. Oh!
The sickest Montreal Canadiens podcast.
You're in the ball!
Sports entertainment like no other.
Rejoint, on lui fait perdre la rondelle, une passe devant. Et c'est le dégagement et ce sera la victoire des Canadiens. Coupe Stanley pour les Canadiens. Le 23e de l'histoire.
You found the dogs! John, you found the dogs! He found the dogs! And all together, they worked a young team to the top. And now, a 24th Stanley Cup banner will hang from the rafters of the famous Forum in Montreal. The Canadiens win the Stanley Cup!
Brought to you by Energy Transportation Group. Driven to be different. La Vida TB. Embrace your true nature. And Playground, your premier gaming destination. It's gonna be sick.
Matt Ohayon with you on the Sick Podcast. It's Friday evening. Your weekend has arrived. Let's jump into things. The Sick Podcast is brought to you by Energy Transportation Group. Energy Transportation Group is a leading full-service logistics provider serving all of North America, driven to be different. We're also brought to you by Tibi beer. Tibi has launched their new Ultra Lager, a refreshing, thirst-quenching beer, perfect for hot summer days, with only 90 calories, 2 grams of carbs, and 4% alcohol per can. Available in a pack of 6 and 12 in grocery stores and C-stores all around the province of Quebec. Ultra light, ultra refreshing. Play lucky numbers at Playground. Earn your daily entries and return every Sunday for a chance to win a share of $15,000 in cash prizes with $5,000 top prize. And on July 28th, one lucky winner will take home $10,000 at the $30,000 finale. Visit playground.ca for details. You know, all insurance isn't created equal, and you know where to find the right solution for you. Accent Insurance. Accent doesn't sell insurance; they shop insurance for you to find you the right product, right on the money, whatever your insurance needs, home, auto, or business. And finally, we're brought to you by Betway. Betway is a leading global online betting and gaming brand. Follow your gut instinct and go with Betway. Go on betway.com or scan the QR code to join the action. Must be 18 years or older and play responsibly. Okay, I mean, listen, not much is happening in Canadiens land. Not much is happening in NHL land, frankly. But don't worry, we know you got the craze. You're more focused on the Habs than you are on the Euros, than on the Copa America, than on the Olympics, starting in 2 weeks. So we brought in our usual Friday guest, Mr. Stu Cowan, to dive in to the latest Habs topic that I'm going to bring up, and NHL topic that I'm going to bring up. Dive in harder that Rodrigo DePaul dove against Canada when he got hit by a ball in the back.
I hope he can lead a normal life after that injury.
I wonder if he'll be in the final. If he'll play. Who knows?
Well, the trainer should hold him out as a precautionary reason after such a serious injury like that. It looked like it could be life-threatening.
You know, it's such a shame that stuff happens, because, you know, you could watch a game like that, and then you could watch a game like England and the Netherlands and see all the excitement around it. And that game was fantastic. That's what soccer is. And then you go watch Canada, Argentina, and Canada played well, but, you know, it's a shame that those things overtake the beauty of the game and the good game that was actually played. But anyways, that's neither here nor there.
I'm not a big soccer guy, but I mean, the soccer's been amazing. I've watched more soccer the last couple of weeks than I've watched in I don't know how long. But you're right. I mean, I don't understand why they accept that as part of the game, but they do, and it looks like it'll never change.
Exactly. So let's talk about a different game where diving is a little bit of a problem, but it's not on the top of the agenda. So we won't talk about diving in hockey today. Let's talk about the two biggest prospects for the Canadiens. You wrote a column about them today, and David Reinbacher and Ivan Demidov, and just how instrumental they're going to be to this rebuild. And I guess I'll start with this. Do you think that the pick of Demidov kind of bought the Canadiens some grace with the fan base for this year, in that maybe Kent Hughes is going to pull off a trade. We don't know. It hasn't happened yet. But if he doesn't, are people going to be okay with it because of the pick they made?
I'd be surprised if Hughes doesn't make another trade before the season starts to try and get a top 6 forward or a potential top 6 forward. But the Demidov pick definitely gives Canadiens fans hope for the future, because the biggest problem with this team is obvious. They don't have enough forwards who can produce offense, and Demidov, that's something he can do. So I think that gives them reason for optimism moving forward. But I think the fan base will be disappointed if Hughes doesn't do anything else before the start of the season, because if they come back with basically the same team as last year, they're not going to make the playoffs again. I mean, they're just not going to get enough offense from their forwards to do it. Kirby Dach coming back, that's like adding another top 6 forward if he can stay healthy, and there's a big if to that. So I think fans will be disappointed if Hughes doesn't do anything else before the start of the season. But again, I'd be surprised if he doesn't.
Yeah, I would be surprised too, just because we know Demidov will be here next year, but it's easy to say. It's like we spoke about last week. I don't think I've ever seen since Kent Hughes came in, the vibes around the Habs nation so high as they still are right now, frankly. But it's easy to say that now when there's no hockey being played, and it's not January and the Canadiens are on a 9-game losing streak, and it's minus 30 outside, and 30 centimeters of snow just fell, and you just came home from sitting in 2 hours of traffic, and now you got to watch the Canadiens, try to stave off their 10th loss in a row. So I think that's a big distinction to make for a lot of fans. And I think, exercise caution if you're a Canadiens fan. Don't get too high, but don't get too low on the team.
Well, the other thing with Demidov, he wasn't at the development camp. He doesn't have a Canadian visa yet. He only had an American visa, which is why he was able to attend the draft in Vegas and not be in Brossard. But Michael Hage, their second first-round pick, was there and looked really good. Lots of offensive skill, good shot, smooth skater, good stick handler. You see everything that the Canadiens saw in him while they moved up from 26 to 21 to get him. He obviously needs to get bigger. And after going to the University of Michigan, I wrote a column this week. That's the smart move for him. He'll have lots of time to be in the weight room and eat well and sleep well and everything else. He's probably a couple of years away from being ready to play pro, whether that's with Laval or with the Canadiens. But with Demidov, be interesting to see if we see him at the main training camp. He wasn't committed to it when they spoke with him after the draft. And with Russia, you never know what's going to happen over there. But it'll be great to see him come to training camp. But again, he gives hope for next season. He's the type of player I would be surprised if he doesn't come over here and be able to get a spot on the Canadiens, for the simple reason they need guys like him, right? They need guys like him. He looks like, watching him at the draft, he's got that confident, that little bit of cockiness to him. He looks like a man. Like, he physically looks like he's ready to play in the NHL. Playing against men this season, he should be in the KHL with St. Petersburg. So again, it's hope for a year down the road. But again, I think the Canadiens fans are looking for a little bit more hope heading into the season. And Kent Hughes has lots of things to deal, right? He's got lots of young defensemen. He's got lots of draft picks moving forward. He's still got a lot on his plate, even though it's a summer. He's still got to hire a coach for Laval. They still need to decide if they're going to hire another assistant coach for Marty St. Louis to replace Burroughs. I'd be surprised if they don't. And again, I think they need to make some kind of a move to try and get it. Arbor Jacki still isn't signed. They give him a qualifying offer. So there's a lot of things that Kent Hughes has still got to do. He's not on vacation yet. He's still got some work on his desk. So
let's talk about the other 5th overall pick before we talk about, potential, Kent Hughes' summer checklist, which is David Reinbacher. He was a big part of your column, and he's going to be a big part of this rebuild. And I think, with the emergence of all the defensive prospects and, all of them becoming NHL ready, getting some time with the big club, except for Reinbacher, I think a lot of people are forgetting about him. And he's a 5th overall pick. And, this went into, we've talked about this when talking about potential trades. And, we spoke about a couple of weeks ago how we both kind of agreed that when you said that you would trade Caden Gooley plus whatever for a top 6 forward, I agreed, because I am of the mindset of, while yes, Caden Gooley looks good, if David Reinbacher isn't better than Caden Gooley as a 5th overall pick, the Canadiens are in big trouble.
Yeah,
So
I'd still be hesitant with Gooley. I think there's other younger defensemen they'd rather move. But I mean, one of the reasons the Canadiens became as bad as they did is that they had 2 third overall picks in Galchenyuk and Kotkaniemi, and neither of those worked out. And when you miss on high draft picks like that, you're going to pay a price down the road. So now that's with Demidov and Reinbacher, 2 top 5, number 5 overall picks. Like, they're big building blocks. They're big keys to whether this rebuild is going to be successful moving forward. Reinbacher wasn't at the development camp either. They preferred he stay over in Austria or wherever he is spending the summer in Europe, work on his training there, which makes sense rather than having him fly here and fly back. And plus everything he went through last year when he arrived here. Remember all the negativity surrounding him as being the number 5 pick. So I understand that. But it was interesting talking with Rob Ramage, the Canadiens director of player personnel at development camp. And, he admitted that, Reinbacher had a rough season last year. He really struggled. He had a good training camp with the Canadiens. Then he went back over to play in Swiss league, and his team was bad, went through 3 coaches. And Ramage said he went over and visited Reinbacher in late November and sat down with him. And he said at that time he thought Reinbacher had too many voices in his head, 3 different coaches and people telling him this and people telling him that. And Ramage sat down with him and showed him video of Shea Weber and how to just play a simple, solid 2-way defensive game and just sort of settle down. Like, just be who you are. Don't try to be this big goal scorer. Don't try to be what you are and why we drafted you as high as we did. A solid defensive right-hand shot defenseman, where the right-hand shot part is really important. And Ramage said he settled down after that and had a better second half. And he played well when he came to Laval. And Ramage also said about how important it was to get him to Laval, to get him on the smaller rink, to get him here, to get him with their coaching staff, their development staff. JF Houle spoke after the season about how Reinbacher had a really good stick, good gap control, needs to get stronger, which is normal for someone his age. But I think that was a really good way for Reinbacher to finish the season on a positive note after all the negativity he went through playing the Swiss. To come over here and get those, I think it was 9 games or whatever he played in Laval, and they were in a playoff push. There were high-pressure games, and he played well, and we saw a little bit about what the Canadiens saw in him that made him a number 5 pick, even though if it upset some Canadiens fans who would wish they'd drafted a forward.
I can't imagine as an 18, 19-year-old what having 3 coaches in a season could do to you. I mean, I've gone through jobs where I've had 3 bosses not in 1 year. We're talking, over 2 years. And that was, caused a big commotion amongst my team of colleagues and myself. And then, expectations of yourself get kind of mixed because you don't know what you're supposed to be doing. So that can just totally derail a season, which it did for his team and him, frankly. But like you said, I remember when he did come over, and I think he scored in his first game, or he had an assist in his first game, something like that. And everyone just completely forgot about what was going on in Europe, and the excitement came back, which was great. I think that was very, very important for him.
Rob Ramage also spoke about how Owen Beck had a bit of a tough season last season, starting in the OHL. And he said for both of those guys, it's not a bad thing to go through some adversity. As he said, they're going to go through it when they get to the NHL. Every player goes through adversity and ups and downs in the NHL. So he said it's not horrible that Reinbacher went through what he went through last season, because it's an experience for him. It's how he bounces back from it. And he bounced back well playing in Laval afterwards. I wrote a column this week saying it's obvious when you speak with the players the Canadiens have selected at the last 3 drafts since Gorton and Hughes took over, they put a high importance on being intellectuals and character. And David Reinbacher, when you speak to him, is a really smart guy beyond his years. The same when you talk with Jacob Fowler, the same with Slavkovsky. They're mature kids. They're kids. Yeah, it's easy to forget they're kids. They're teenagers. but they're mature beyond their years. And so for Reinbacher, and he handled everything really well when he came to Montreal at development camp last year. And there was all that negativity around him, surrounding him, about how the Canadiens wasted a pick on him. Handled all that really well. It sounds like he handled what happened to him, the ups and downs this season, playing in the Swiss League well. So I'm looking forward to seeing him when training camp starts, to see what he can do. He played a couple of preseason games last season. I imagine he'll play more this season. I don't see him cracking the lineup to start the season. I think the Canadiens would want him to play full year in Laval, getting used to the smaller rink without the intense pressure that would be on him here with the Canadiens. I think that's a smart move. As I said, I think it was a smart move letting him stay back home and not bringing him over for development camp. But Rob Bramage said he'll be here probably the end of August, starting to get ready for the training camp in mid-September with the Canadiens.
Now, I know, Canadiens fans can only read and listen to and watch what is being put out there. But I'll say this to Canadiens fans, and the ones especially that, say that Reinbacher will be no better than a 2, no better than a 3, whatever the case may be. Just look at what the Canadiens brass saw in Juraj Slafkovsky, and everyone thought that was the wrong pick, and how that turned out. So just give Reinbacher some time, because frankly, if he's a true 5th overall pick, that's your blue chip defensive prospect, because the Canadiens, while they do have a lot of quality on the back end. Let's not dance around it. But if he can be, the heir to the number 1 spot, the Canadiens are in a very, very good position going forward for this rebuild, and to their goal of competing, into the future for a sustainable amount of years, rather than just making the playoffs crapping out another year and all that. So just give him time, and I don't know where you view him and what you view his potential, but I'll trust in the Canadiens brass right now, because they have not given me any reason to distrust them at this point. And I'll think the sky's the limit for this guy.
I mean, I think the Canadiens looking forward, they see Reinbacher as a possible top pairing defenseman on the right side with Caden Gooley on the left side, going back to his regular side. I mean, Gooley's been playing on his offside a lot, just because they don't have enough right-hand defensemen. And that's one of the reasons. Again, I don't think the Canadiens draft Reinbacher if he was a left-hand shot. I think the fact he's a right-hand shot weighed heavily in their decision. Gooley's 22, Reinbacher's 19. If those two guys can develop, we've already seen Caden Gooley, what he can do. Injuries are an issue with Caden Gooley also. He's had a couple of concussions now, along with other injuries. But I think the Canadiens see that possibly as their future. 4 years down the road, when this rebuild, they're at a point where they should be a competitive playoff team, that could be their top defense pairing moving forward. So again, he's only 19 years old. Easy to forget how young these guys are. Defensemen develop a little slower. It takes a little longer for them to get ready to play. So again, I think a full season in the AHL, just like they did with Logan Mailloux last season, we saw his development. I think that'll be a really smart move by the Canadiens heading into the next season.
Now, I'm not the biggest fan of these things that always, whenever it's draft season and the broadcast prop these up and in the comparables. I'm not a big fan of that. However, just based off of a quick Google search, David Reinbacher, his comparable was, I see 2 that are, coming up most at the top, which are Moritz Seider and Shea Theodore. If you drafted Moritz Seider and you're the Montreal Canadiens, and you know what? If you're a Canadiens fan and you haven't watched a lot of Moritz Seider, just go on YouTube after this podcast is done and search up Moritz Seider highlights. I think you'll be quite pleased with what you see if David Reinbacher can turn into Moritz Seider, who, by all accounts, that's a true number 1 defenseman for Detroit. And he was drafted 6th overall. So just 1 pick before, after Reinbacher, I should say.
Well, I mentioned before about the Canadiens putting a focus on intelligence and character when they're drafting. They're also putting a focus on players having the mentality to be able to survive in the fishbowl that's Montreal with the bright spotlight. And we've seen that with Slafkovsky, how well he's handled it through the ups and downs. Kotkaniemi, on the other hand, didn't handle it that well, right? Galchenyuk didn't handle it that well. Kotkaniemi, when things were going great, he was great. You could tell he was happy-go-lucky, a good kid, nice kid. Now when things went bad, wasn't so much that way. Whereas with Slafkovsky, he's pretty even keel. And Reinbacher, the way he handled everything last year, all the negativity from some fans surrounding him being picked, he handled it like a veteran when he got to Montreal. So Jacob Fowler also speaking with him. You go down the line, Owen Protz, 4th round pick the Canadiens had. I wrote about him today. Big kid, throws hip checks. Again, you speak with him, you see the character, you see the intelligence, and he's a kid also who seems to enjoy being in front of the cameras and enjoy quite funny, outgoing personality. So that's a big thing when it comes to playing in Montreal. And this Canadiens management team realizes that, and it's something I think that Marc Bergevin underestimated. When he made the trade for Jonathan Drouin. Jonathan Drouin just wasn't built to handle all the pressure that came with playing with Montreal, and we see what he's done now since he left and went to Colorado. He had his best season of his career. So that's that. The Canadiens have put focus on that, and that's really important in this market. It really, really is. You got to be able to handle the ups and downs of playing in Montreal. The ups are fantastic. When things are going great, there's no better place in the NHL to play. When things are going bad, there's probably no worse place. And Carey Price is a perfect example of that, of everything he went through during his career here. The highs are very high, but the lows can be very low. I mean, I can remember Carey talking about how he didn't even want to go out and do groceries anymore, right? He didn't want to be out in the public and have people looking at him and saying things about him. So it's really important, and the Canadiens, this management team, understands that.
And you know what? I think I think frankly, Chantal Machabée, she plays a big role in protecting some of the players as well as a director of communications, because, you're not really controlling what the media is saying, but you control access. And while you're very open with it, I think her being a former media member herself, being on that side, talking about players, that can be an asset. I don't know in which way materially, but it gives you skills to talk to these guys as well, and just being like, hey, these things are being said. You have a meeting with Kent Hughes. Hey, Kent, I saw this article. He may have came across it. This is what the writer was thinking, blah, 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 and so on and so forth. I don't know. That's just the spitball. I think that could be an asset. I think the Canadiens, just as an organization, are doing a very good job of insulating their players because they know how young of a group it is.
Well, the other thing Chantal has done, and I spoke with her about this, is encourage the players to be themselves. Like Cole Caulfield's a funny kid. He's got a great personality. Previous administration of the Canadiens, they didn't want them to say anything, right? Just cliche, say nothing, get it over with, and leave. She doesn't want them to do that. She wants them to show their character. She wants them to have some fun with it. We saw that with Owen Protz. I mean, what a kid's hilarious. He's talking about, I asked him about, how he learned to throw hip checks. He threw about 4 of them in the scrimmage. And he says, my parents had a VCR at the cottage when I was a kid. I mean, an 18-year-old kid even knowing what a VCR is shocking. And he watched these old videos from the 50s and 60s of defensemen throwing hip checks. And he talked about how, he's been going to the gym 6 days a week since he was 12 because he loves to eat. And when he was in daycare, he said, I eat like 6 meals a day. So he was really outgoing and funny, and it was a breath of fresh air. And that has a lot to do with Chantal telling these guys, be yourselves. Don't be afraid to be yourselves with the media. She's also been trying to explain to them the difference between reporters who are there every day, myself, people on the beat and see these guys every day, and we're in the room every day, and the guys that are never there and maybe have loud voices on social media, that there's sort of a difference between them. But with Protz, I thought, Chantal was smiling after that kid's interview. He was so good in front of the cameras. And so, and as she has said, she fell in love with the Canadiens because of Guy Lafleur. She loved Guy Lafleur, and she used to talk about waiting outside the players' entrance at the Forum there on Atwater for him. She said she has like 50 Guy Lafleur autographs, and she wants fans to fall in love with the players today the same way she fell in love with Guy Lafleur. And I think they're doing a good job of that by just see some of the videos they have on Twitter, some of the things they're doing differently, trying to show the character these players have. I mean, Cole Caulfield is one of those kids that looks like he's never had a bad day, right? All the videos he appreciates how lucky he is to be playing hockey for a living and going to the rink every day, and he's happy-go-lucky. Even when he was hurt after he had that shoulder injury, you'd see him watching practices from the bench, and he was goofing around, spraying water on guys, and just having a good time. So, it's big business, sports, especially with the Canadiens, but they're encouraging these kids to have a little bit of fun and not be afraid to show their personality when they're speaking with the media. And I think it's great. It's great for me as a writer covering them, rather. Oh yeah. And it's great for fans to get a chance to know a little bit about what these guys really are like. I mean, people in the city worship these guys. The team hasn't made the playoffs in 3 years, and interest has never been higher, right? I mean, look at the crowd that was out at the development camp. People love the Canadiens. I think it's important for the Canadiens as an organization to let the fans get to know these players a little bit more than just hockey players, right? More than look at Brendan Gallagher got married on the weekend, and on our Gazette website, we posted some pictures and some notes, and it was like a thread thing on our website. People love this team. They love the player. They want to know more about them. So I think it's really important what Chantal is doing. I think I wrote that when they hired her. I've known Chantal for years, covering the beat and traveling on the road, and as the group of media covering them. And at the time I wrote it was a fantastic hire, and I still think that. I mean, Chantal is a perfect person for that job in this market.
It's funny because I was just thinking, of the players in my generation that have been not immortalized, but, they really mean something. When you say their name, it carries weight. And there's two guys, three, I'll say, that come to mind. The first one that came to mind was PK Subban, of course. And you want to talk personality and being out there.
Yeah.
He's Mr. Personality. The next one that came to mind was Saku Koivu. I wouldn't say so much personality, but just what he meant for this city, the plight he went throughout his career in Montreal, and then his whole story with coming back from cancer and bringing the first machine to Montreal, the first CAT scan machine to Montreal. Just what he means, that his name holds a lot of weight in this city.
Yeah.
And the other one is Brendan Gallagher. Those are the three names, and all three of them, it's for reasons, obviously they are and were all great players for the Montreal Canadiens. However, it's the reasons off the ice that those names hold a lot of weight in this city. And that's what this team needs. We can sing the praises of Nick Suzuki all we want, and Cole Caulfield all we want. And frankly, if they weren't doing the right things, spending their summers in Montreal, putting their faces out there, being themselves, we wouldn't talk about them the same way, because we don't really talk. Max Pacioretty was a great player. He scored 30 goals for how many years in this, wearing a Canadian sweater. We don't talk about him anymore. I haven't. His name hasn't crossed my mind in a long time as a member of the Canadiens, because they just didn't show personality.
Yeah, I mean, Pacioretty had sort of a mixed relationship with the media. He was very sensitive. He read, I think, and heard too much. I think that impacted his play. He let it weigh him down. But with Gallagher, I mean, I have the utmost respect for Brendan Gallagher as a person and as a hockey player. I mean, is he overpaid now? Yes, on this contract. No doubt about it. Will he give you 100% every single time he's on the ice, whether it's practice or a game or a preseason game? Yes, that's never going to change. I respect and admire that about him. The other thing I admire about Brendan Gallagher is the relationship he's had with the media. He's never been a real cliche guy. He's been very honest with the media. Apart from when he's injured, he'll never say he's hurt, even if he had an arrow through his head. But I remember it was a few years ago when the Canadiens were going through a rough patch, and Brendan did about a 20-minute scrum in the locker room, and then he did a little one-on-one with a couple of guys, and then I asked him, Brendan, can I get 5 more minutes with you if you don't mind? And he granted it to me, and I spoke with him for a little while. And after the interview, I said to him, I don't know, I just want to thank you for always being available and always being willing to take the extra time for a couple of one-on-one questions or whatnot. I remember a game in Columbus. It was a back-to-back. I can't remember where they played the night before, but Pat Hickey covered the game the night before, and then I was at the morning skate the next day. And I asked to speak with Gallagher, and I was told Dominic Sion was a media guy at the time. He said, he spoke last night. I'm not going to bring him out again. So, okay. So what I'll ask him. Okay, so I went and asked him, and Brendan came out and spoke with me again. So the interview, when I spoke with him afterwards, and I thanked him, for always being willing to taking the time, whether things are going good, whether things are going bad. And he gave me a great answer. He basically said, look, I understand when I speak to you, I'm speaking to you, but I'm speaking to the fans, and through you. And the fans want to know, they want to know that we're trying our best. They want to know that we're going out. They want to know we're not mailing it in. They want to know about us. And that's part of the job. And Brendan realized that himself. I think Chantal now is trying to explain that to some of the younger people. But it is an important part. I mean, people want to know what the Canadiens are doing and thinking, whether they're playing poorly or playing badly. I always wonder, is there more interest in the Canadiens when they're playing well or when they're playing bad, right? It's sort of people get angry when they're bad and people are thrilled when they're playing well. But Brendan's always gotten it with the relationship with the media. I hear people sometimes people criticize, why do these guys even talk to you? They shouldn't have to talk to you. It's the teams and the leagues that force the players to talk to the media. It's not the media. They're selling their product, right? They want us talking about the Canadiens. They want me writing about the Canadiens. They want people to know about the team. And without the media in Montreal, the Canadiens wouldn't be as popular as they are. Same with any other team. Same as the Yankees in New York City or whatnot. So that's why it's the teams and the leagues that force. There's rules in place that players have to speak to the media. It's not the media telling players you have to speak with us. So it's a hand-in-hand relationship where these guys and as a journalist, you really appreciate when guys are willing, understand that, are willing to talk to you and don't just speak in cliches and sort of give you honest answers and thoughtful answers when you ask them a question. Marty St. Louis, as a coach, he's the best I've ever seen at that. Like, nobody gets more questions from the media than Marty St. Louis in this province. The premier doesn't. Nobody does. He does game day. He does a press conference before the game. He does a press conference after the game. Practices. He speaks to the media minimum once and usually twice a day. And he never really gives a cliche answer. He has some favorite lines he uses that he comes back to, which is understandable. But Marty's another guy who's really good at it. And Kent Hughes spoke. It was Kent Hughes or Jeff Gorton spoke about this recently, saying he's the biggest messenger. St. Louis is the biggest messenger the Canadiens have for what they're trying to sell. This rebuilding program. He's their main messenger to the fans through the media about what they're working on and what they're trying to do. And he does. Marty does a fantastic job of dealing with the media. And I'm sure, in both languages also. And I'm sure there's times that he doesn't want to do it, which would just be natural, but he never mails it in. Like every news conference he does, he gives thoughtful answers, and he lets fans have an idea of what they're trying to accomplish and how they're trying to accomplish it. You talked about Yuri Slafkovsky earlier. When he was struggling, Marty was saying, we're not throwing the whole book at him at once. We're going page by page. We'll work on this one thing, and once he gets that, we'll move on to something else. And once he gets that, we'll move on to something else. And that's, now you look at the finished product they have at the end of the season, and it worked. So Marty explained to fans what they were trying to do, whether they accepted it or whatever. Now when you look back, you go, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? Rather than throwing everything at an 18-year-old kid at once, now we're going to work on his playing the defensive zone. Okay, we got that. Now we're going to work on him being stronger on the puck. Okay, now we got that. Now we're going to work on him being more physical. And Adam Nicholas had a big deal to do with this also. And step by step by step by step. So that's why going ahead to next season, how much more improvement will Slafkovsky make? Kent Hughes has been honest with the media also, saying that he expects Slafkovsky to have another dip before he takes off. It's just the natural line of progression for a young player. But again, just the honesty they have is about what they're trying to do with this team and how they're trying to rebuild it. And fans can disagree with it and think the answers are wrong or stupid, but they're giving you the answers about what they're trying to do. And a lot of the answers they've given make a lot of sense, especially when you look at the development of Slafkovsky.
You know what I like a lot about the answers that they give is that this is this was a discussion on my Twitter sphere that came up when talking about football. And I think it could relate to hockey, but in a positive way. Because in football, we see a lot of clips of, the analysts that are former players breaking down film. And frankly, me, I think all of our viewers and listeners know me at this point. I'm a massive football guy. I don't know what the hell they're talking about on all these clips. They're very cool to watch, but I don't know what the hell is going on, because the sport of football, it was Pablo Torre who came out with this take. He's for those who watch TSN, he's a fill-in on all the ESPN syndicated show that they put on, and he basically said we fetishize jargon. And, with, you see this with clips, of quarterbacks in the huddle, and they're just talking nonsense to their players, and, people eat it up. I don't find there's a lot of that in hockey. I find, especially in the Montreal market, I find that when you ask a question, you being any reporter, to Martin St. Louis, to Kent Hughes, to Jeff Gordon, they're not going to just confuse you with all their lingo of what's going on. They're going to sit there and they're going to give you your 5-minute answer to explain it.
Yeah, I've always been a believer in my job. I don't think the average Canadiens fan or the average sports fan, even the above average sports fan, is really all that interested in the minute breakdown of how the working or how the power play is working or how I've always thought they're more interested in sort of the human interest side of the sports. Like they want to know about these players, maybe a little bit of that. So I've always sort of weighed more to the human interest angle story rather than the nuts and bolts about how they're forechecking or what, because I really don't know how many fans are that interested in it. I mean, they have a vague, okay, the power play is sucking. Why? Okay, so they go to the point. But I don't know if they want the actual, 800-word breakdown of how power play isn't working or whatnot. So I agree. I mean, with football, you look at some of the stuff. I mean, I watched that Netflix documentary on the quarquarterbacks, and how do they remember that? I mean, they had one of the quarterbacks in his car, right, listening to the calls and repeating them.
Oh yeah,
that was for people who haven't watched it. That was fascinating. The head call comes in his headset, and like he's got to repeat it, and it's like wow. I mean, hockey obviously isn't that technical just yet. I wonder if we'll ever have a day where they actually have headsets in a centerman's helmet or something before defensive zone faceoff. I mean, the way technology is going in hockey, reviewing every offside to see if it was off by a hair. Maybe we'll get to that point. I hope it doesn't. But again, I think the average or the majority of sports fans, I think, are interested in the human interest side of sports and who these guys are and what they are and what makes them tick and what doesn't make them tick, stuff like that. So that's sort of the approach I've always taken, and not as heavily into the nuts and bolts, as you were saying, of breaking down different plays or different systems.
Well, that's it. And for the people that write those articles, I think that Martin St. Louis is the best person to be asking these questions.
Without a doubt.
Just because he'll give you the technical answer, but he'll also break it down. And that's the part that gets disseminated to the fans, because, when you start talking F1, F2, and D1, and he's on the half wall there, and we want to get it cross-ice feed because it'll displace the D1 on the other team, like, you lost me. It's over. And you probably lost a lot of people.
I mean, F1 obviously the first forward in on the forecheck. So for fans explaining that, I think that's like, when they are talking about F1 and some fans are, what is that? That's the first forward in on the forecheck, and F2 is the second guy back. So things like that, I think, are important. But I remember this year, there was a reporter who asked St. Louis a technical question about analytics or something. And even he sort of laughed and he said, I think you spend more time looking at those numbers than I do. It's so, I mean, Canadiens realize, analytics is a huge part, right? They brought in this whole new analytics department since Jeff Gorton took over, but it's not the be all and the end all of hockey, at least not in my opinion. I think the analytics get too much emphasis a lot of the time when it comes to hockey.
The thing about analytics is that I find, like you said, I'm of the belief that it has its place in the game for sure.
Excuse me.
Because, bless you. Why would you ever just discount a piece of information that will help you improve? Why would you ever do that? But
analytics started in baseball, and baseball was made for analytics. I mean, baseball is a stagnant sport, right? Hockey and football is a flow,
exactly.
Baseball, it's either you hit the ball, you don't hit the ball. There's analytics that prove that you hardly ever see a guy bunt anybody over anymore, because analytics show that the odds, the percentages of giving up and out to move a guy to second base don't work. That makes sense. Baseball and analytics go hand in hand, right? Now they figured out that now baseball has become nothing but how hard can you throw the ball and how hard can you hit the ball, right? It's taken a lot of the strategy out of the game. The hit and run, you don't see much. They even had to eliminate the shift because guys are just pulling. Well, just hit the ball the other way if they have the shift, but no, they don't. Exactly. Like baseball, that's not it. It's the home. Everything lives by the homer. Analytics show that the home run ball is more important than anything else, and that's why you get guys, with hitting 210 now in Major League Baseball or whatever, with lots of home runs, making a ton of money. So to me, like, baseball is analytics. And Billy, that movie about the Oakland A's, showed it. Moneyball, like how. But hockey and analytics, I think, while there is a place for it, it's not the be all and end all in a game that's flowing. And players have even talked to a couple of players in the Canadiens, like, some players know, like, what'll get your analytics numbers high, like, just come over to the blue line and fire a shot with no scoring chance on goal or stuff like there's different things players realize that there's things they can do to make their analytics numbers higher. But again, I mean, the Canadiens ignored analytics before, basically under Marc Bergevin, and you can't ignore it, but it's a part of everything like that. But I think, like Marty's saying, his eye test is still, he'll trust his eye test and take in some of the analytics information and then make a final decision based on all the information he gets. But you can never have too much information, right?
You know the thing that I find very funny about analytics is just so for full disclosure of our fans, we pre-recorded last week, as we are this week, just in case some piece of news comes out. If Connor McDavid gets traded, well, we didn't. Sorry, we missed it. We'll talk about it next week. No, I'm kidding. But right after we stopped recording, there was not a big trade. I mean, I guess if you're a Buffalo Sabres or Edmonton Oilers fan, it was a big trade. Ryan McLeod got traded from the Edmonton Oilers to the Buffalo Sabres in exchange for Matthew Savoie. Matthew Savoie was a 9th overall pick a couple years ago, something like that. And Ryan McLeod, as you may have noticed if you watched and followed along the NHL Stanley Cup Finals, is a 4th liner for the Edmonton Oilers. However, his analytics card, would think this guy is one of the best players in the NHL. No, they traded a 4th line player who got healthy scratched throughout the playoffs regularly for a blue chip prospect. Yeah. And the analytics community was kind of split on it. They didn't know what to do because Matthew Savoie, he's going to be, he's supposed to be a great player coming up, or he was. And Ryan McLeod is Ryan McLeod. He's a 4th line guy. Yeah. But they were kind of split. They didn't know where to go on it. But it just goes to show that the Canadiens are doing things the right way because they're not discounting the information that analytics will give you, but they're not placing all their eggs in that basket. Because frankly, analytics can show a lot of things. And like you love to say, Stu, analytics ain't going to show when it's the playoffs and Austin Matthews gets punched in the mouth. Yeah. Is he going to punch back? That's what they don't show.
I was just going to mention that. That's an NHL scout told me that a few years ago. There's no analytics for the Maple Leafs were built on, Dubas builds his teams on analytics, and it worked in the regular season for the Leafs, or it has worked. But again, as the scout told me, what analytics shows you when a player gets punched in the mouth or slashed on the hand in the playoffs and he doesn't want to play anymore? Is there an analytics stat that tells you that? Not really. So you look at then Dubas now, going on to Pittsburgh and what he's done there. It's basically the same thing that he did in Toronto. It's all about offense, right? And okay, when you get to the playoffs, it's still the team that scores the most goals. I mean, the most important analytics stat is the team that scores the most goals wins, right?
Yes.
But once you get to the playoffs, if the guys who can score in the regular season and the analytics show how great they are, the analytics in the playoffs are different. The playoff hockey is a different game. It's a different world once the playoffs start, and some players are built for it and some players aren't.
So let's just move back to the Canadiens here. Let's talk before we close this thing out. Let's talk about what the Canadiens would look like should they add a top 6 forward. But let's also see the alternative of what they're going to look like should they strike out on trying to acquire one. Now, name of the player doesn't really matter. We'll go with the 3 that are in the news cycle. So I know one of them is in the NHL Player Assistance Program, but we're going to just, these 3 names: Trevor Zegras, Martin Necas, and Patrick Laine. Those are the 3. Canadiens acquire one of them, any of them. What does this team look like next year in terms of standings, wins, losses?
I've said before that Zegras would be at the top of my list. I wouldn't touch Laine right now. I think there's been too much baggage, and I'm not just saying, in the player assistance program, that's part of it. But I mean, he's things that haven't worked out well for him for whatever reason in different places. I think if they can add a Zegras, now you're adding, as I mentioned, now you're adding 2 top 6 forwards or potential with Doc returning and Zegras. Now you'd have a second line of like Doc, Zegras, and Newhook or Joshua Waugh, depending on what happens. Now you've got 2 lines, legitimate scoring lines. A third line, you got Brendan Gallagher, you got Josh Anderson around too. You're hoping, Gallagher played well at the end of last season. Anderson, this is a make or break season for him, I think, coming up. Whatever happens at the center position there, depending if there's Dvorak still there. But I think adding another top 6 forward gives this team a chance to get into the playoffs. I think it gives them a chance. Without it, I don't think they have a chance of getting into the playoffs. They're just not going to have enough offense. It's just not going to happen. As I said, right as of now, it looks like they're coming back with basically the same team as they had last year, and they finished 28th or whatever it was in the standing. So adding a Zegras or a player like that, does that make them a playoff team? No, but I think it gives them a legitimate hope of getting into the playoffs. And also Lane Hudson should help the power play. And the power play has been a problem also. It'll be interesting to see, as I mentioned earlier, like who or if the Canadiens hire another assistant coach. I really think they should to help Marty St. Louis. I think it has to be somebody with NHL experience behind the bench, somebody who can work with power play, or bring in two guys, bring in another assistant behind the bench, and bring in a power play specialist coach. As I've said before, there's no salary cap on coaches. But Gallagher and Anderson and Dvorak, unless they make a trade, are here, right? Your fourth line would be Jake Evans with Harvey Pinard and Pizzetta, or unless Owen Beck pushes and finds a spot. But there's just not enough. And if they don't add a guy, one of those guys is up on the second line, right? Probably Joshua would be, to me, the likely candidate, because a young guy with the potential that we got to talk six forward. But again, I think if they don't do anything else before the start of this season, they're going to end up with a top 5 or 6 draft pick again next year. And sometimes it's not necessarily a bad thing in the rebuild, but I think fans' patience is will start to wear thin this season if they're already out of the playoff spot after, the playoffs are gone after like 50 games and they realize there's no chance. I think fans start tuning out a little bit.
Yeah, and that's when the season becomes long, because 50 games, you're probably in January, February. Dog days of winter are ahead.
The only thing worse than angry fans are fans who don't care, right?
Yeah.
When they stop caring, that's worse than if they're getting upset over wins and losses. When they stop saying, "Oh, okay, enough of this. We don't care anymore."
Yeah, when you rather flip the channel over to I don't even know what's on The Good Doctor.
Well, and that's the thing. Before, like when the end of the Dominic Ducharme coaching era here, I mean, the Habs are down 2-0 in the first period. You flip over, watch Netflix, right, or watch something else. They weren't coming back. It wasn't going to be entertaining. It wasn't going to be fun. Canadiens have been fun to watch last 2 seasons with all these young kids. I expect they're going to be fun to watch again next season, depending on who's there. But at some point, and season ticket holders pay a lot of money for tickets at the Bell Center, right? And that's the patience of them. It's expensive to go to the Bell Center for season ticket holders. It's expensive for fans to taking your kid to the Bell Center is going to put a huge dent in your wallet. So you want to have a hope that they're going to get to the playoffs. You want the games to mean something, right? You don't want to go to a game in March where it's just like, okay, let's hope they lose because we'll get a better draft pick, right? And that's what it's been the last few years. And I think fans are by the end of the season will be getting tired of that.
Yeah, I think so too. Frankly, I've had enough of the draft talk of, when the Canadiens were, even this season, sure, I'm happy the Canadiens ended up with the 5th overall pick, because they got who looks to be a seemingly amazing player. However, it's tiresome to see that, near the end of the season, Canadiens are playing really well. I think, you could highlight that game against Florida. Florida kind of dogged it, but when they won 5-2, Florida dogged it, but the Canadiens deserved that win, and they played well, and it was nice to see. And just seeing, basically 90% of fans just being like, oh, what a waste. I can't believe they won. And now they have to gain another game on Arizona, and Chicago is out of reach. And it's just, are you not tired? Just who cares? Just win the game.
Well, the thing, in Gordon and Hughes, when they took over, they had a mess here, right? The cupboards were pretty empty. Marc Bergevin left empty cupboards as far as prospects and whatnot. You would go a game in Laval, like who in Laval back then was going to play for the Canadiens? Like nobody, right? Just a bunch of guys playing in Laval. That's changed now. You look at last year, you had Logan Mayo, you had Reinbacher there at the end of the season. Jaden Struble. I mean, that's another thing that Rob Ramage talked about, the importance of Reinbacher getting games in Laval. That's what happened with Struble, right? 2 years ago, he played like 9 games in Laval at the end of the season after his university career. He started last season with Laval. He got called up to the Canadiens, and boom, he showed he was an NHL defenseman. So they're sort of hoping that'll have the same impact with Reinbacher. But at least now, if you go watch a game in Laval, there's guys in Laval who could or should play for the Canadiens one day. Jacob Fowler, probably one more year at university. He'll probably be in Laval next year. So there's guys, when you go watch Laval, there's guys that potentially are going to be with the Canadiens in the future. Not comparing it back to the glory days of the junior Canadiens when there was like future Hall of Famers.
Yeah, of course.
Canadiens that were coming up, but at least there's hope. There's guys coming up in the system that should, you go watching in Laval and say that guy could be in the NHL next year in 2 years. So I think that's really important. And Hughes and Gorton have done a really good job of just, accumulating draft picks, accumulating assets, accumulating so many young players in that 21, 22, 23 age group. And that's why there is hope for the future moving forward.
Yeah. And you know what? It's going to be interesting. We're going to talk about this on a future episode because we're just about out of time, but how these prospects and, hopefully by the next episode, the Canadiens will have acquired a top 6 forward. That would be great. But we're going to talk about how potential and, just the Canadiens having, let's just say 6 guys who could score 20 goals, how that actually will materialize, because they can't all score 20 goals. Yeah. Frankly, that's just not how it's going to happen. But that's for an episode for another day.
Last year, the only 3 guys with 20 goals were the number 1 line, right? So
well, there you go. So
3 guys with 20 goals,
and that's why share Canadiens fans. Why I am banging the drum of yes, you do need to go big game hunting, because frankly, 3 guys who will score 20 goals is not going to be good enough to get you into the playoffs. No. And it's also not going to be good enough to push this thing along and get closer, because every year you don't push for the playoffs is another year you sat back and it's another delay, because there will be years where you are going to push for the playoffs. Then there's going to be that year where you squeak into 8th. Then there's going to be that year where you make it comfortably in the fourth slot or whatever. It's a progression thing. It doesn't happen overnight. Anyways,
their long-range goal, I've said right from day one, Gorton and Hughes, is they want a team that's going to be not just make the playoffs every year, but be competitive. Like that, be the number 4 seed, be the number 5 seed, the 3 seed, be there. Not like making the playoffs isn't the goal at the start of the season, right? Going into getting the playoffs is the expectation, and then how far are we going to go?
They want to make it into the playoffs consistently with over 100 points every year. That's the bottom line. Mm-hmm. I feel like every episode we do scores 100 points. So we can have that in our back corner and pat ourselves on the back for that. Stu, thank you very much. Enjoy the weekend and stay cool, stay dry. I don't know what's going on this weekend with the weather, but stay cool and enjoy yourself.
All right, you too.
That was Stu Cowan. I'm Matt Ohayon. Enjoy your weekend, everyone. We'll talk next time.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. The Sick Podcast is brought to you by Energy Transportation Group, driven to be different. LaVie.tv. Embrace your true nature. And Playground, your premier gaming destination.